Okay, so this week we'll go ahead and take a look at Lab 5. So kind of trying to pick up from where we were cut off last week with the second half of Chapter 3. So taking a look at our lab assignments. So we'll start with Lab 5. So for those of you that have already opened Lab 5, since the directions go up at the same time that I send out the Zoom invite, if you've already read through them, you might have noticed that there's something a little bit different about the lab directions this week compared to the other four. The first couple of steps look very familiar compared to how I usually describe the labs, where I just kind of go very particularly through each one of the different lines of code that you'll need to include. But you probably noticed that the last step is not quite like the others. So we'll go ahead and take a quick look at this lab and see what I'm talking about. So for this week, it's lab 5. This one is going to be a word sorter. So this is really kind of uh, testing your understanding of conditional code, dealing with if, else, if, and else statements, as well as incorporating a couple of other things into it. So going through this purpose here, we can see that we're going to be making use out of if, else statements, and also logical operators and some methods for string comparisons. So once we actually go through the details of this, you'll see there's quite a bit that you'll need to be doing with each one of those different, there's 3 different parts to it. So for this one, you'll go ahead and create a project called word sorter, and then your first and last name, or lab 5 in your first and last name. You also want to make sure that you include comments summarizing the key parts of the program. And for this one, it's just going to be broken up into 4 steps, with the 4th step being um, a bit more general than usual. So for the first 3, number 1, you'll go ahead and import the scanner class and then construct an object of the scanner class that will read keyboard input. So this lab is kind of the one exception after learning about input dialog boxes and message dialog boxes, where we'll kind of fall back on using the scanner class to handle this. For the rest of the labs after this one, it's either going to be dealing with dialog boxes, or after we learn a little bit about it a couple weeks from now, we'll also be dealing with using text files. So that'll be another thing, but that'll come a few weeks from now. So for this one, we're going to go ahead and use the scanner class. In step 2, you'll go ahead and declare 3 string variables that are going to hold 3 different words that the user will be entering. So these are going to be the 3 words that you will eventually have to sort through. So the order that the user provides them to you in can just be whatever order they please. But by the end of this, we're going to make sure that those words have been sorted in alphabetical order. So that was kind of the main plan here. For step 3, you'll go ahead and print 3 requests to the user asking for each one of those 3 different words. You'll go ahead and store the user's input for each of them into each of these string variables. So you'll have one request, put that into the first of those 3 string variables, a second request, put that into the second one, and then a third request, go ahead and put that into the third one. And then in step 4, this is where the bulk of this program comes up. So the order of the words will depend on the order of the statements to print those words to the console in. What that is saying is that if the first word that the user provides, so when they get these 3 requests, if the first word that they input to the program is also the first word that comes alphabetically, then that would mean that that needs to be the first print statement that you include when you get into this part right here. If the second word comes second alphabetically, then that's the next print statement, and then so on. So basically what's going to happen is that you're going to use your if, and else statements to determine which print statement should come when. Okay. So to determine the order to print the words in, you'll need to compare the words using the appropriate method of the string class. So this is one of the first instances. Instead of just explicitly telling you which method you'll need to use, I'm going to leave it to you to kind of figure out which method you'll need to use for that. I will say that in the video in which I cover the different methods of the string class, I do actually show a quick example with one of those methods that kind of demonstrates exactly this behavior. But in that particular case, I just do it with 2 different words, just really quick. But there is an instance where I show this. So based on that, if you've watched that video, or if you go back and watch that video, you should be able to figure out pretty easily which one I'm talking about. I also make a few clarifications to be very specific about which method you want to go ahead and use. So we're going to go ahead and assume that case doesn't matter. So we're not really concerned with whether or not the words are capitalized or not. And we're going to assume that the user is entering 3 different words. So we're not too concerned with cases where they give us the same word twice. We're just going to assume that they don't do that. Additionally, you must do comparisons between all pairs of words to determine the correct order. So that last statement there is just a clarification about how the logic for this works. And then in this next little paragraph that I've included right here, I kind of further clarify what that means. So to give you an example, if we want to determine if the last word that the user enters comes first alphabetically, we still have to compare that to the other 2 words. So we need to compare that to the first word they gave us and to the second word that they gave us. Because if we only compare it to one, we don't necessarily know where that word comes in relation to the other word. So you got to do it with all of them. So if the last word does come first alphabetically, meaning that we did those 2 checks and they both came up true, then we still have to do another comparison with the remaining 2 words to determine which one of those comes before the other. So this is going to be used to determine which comes second alphabetically and which comes last alphabetically. Okay. So then to kind of give you an example of what this looks like, I've got 2 examples here just to show it with different inputs to make sure that we understand that you're not just going to provide specific words to this program and then just sort those. The assumption here is that the user gets to pick any words that they want to, and it will always sort those words correctly. So the following are going to be 2 examples of the user's inputs with different words in some different initial orderings. The final output should be the words the user entered in alphabetical order. So for these, I just went ahead and used some really simple words. The first one, I went ahead and entered the words candy, apple, and banana. And then you can see at the very end, this little portion right here, that the 3 words are printed out alphabetically. So you have apple, banana, and candy. And then for the second example, I went ahead and did it with 3 other different words. So you have acting, cooking, and baking for this one. You'll also notice that the ordering alphabetically is different. So like you'll notice for this one, it was CAB, but for this one, it's ACB. And so then when it actually prints them out, again, it's going to be acting, baking, and cooking. So making sure that it's alphabetized at the end. So then going through the criteria. So the comment summarizing the program is going to be worth 5 points. A proper import statement and the variable declarations is going to be worth 5 points as well. That's covering just steps 1 and 2. Correctly requesting user input and then storing each value into a variable is going to be worth 2 points per request. That'd be 6 points total. That's just talking about step 3. And then finally, step 4, which is the majority of what you need to do for this lab, properly comparing and printing the 3 strings in alphabetical order is going to be worth 14 points for each of these 6 possible initial orderings provided by the user. So that step by itself will be 84 points in total. One thing I'll note is that once you figure out the logic for one of them, then as you go through each one of the other cases after that, it's kind of just rearranging which words you're comparing. So once you figure out how to do it for one of them, then the rest come pretty easily after that. The tricky part is just getting the first one figured out. So in a second, I'll go ahead and switch to a different screen where I've got this put together on NetBeans. So I'll go ahead and run it on that to show you what it looks like, as you're actually going through the different steps of the program. But before I do that, does anybody have any questions about the directions so far? So I say that you don't necessarily need to or have to use NetBeans for this, but to kind of get in the habit of doing these programs through an IDE and not necessarily just through REPL, it might be a good idea to start getting in the habit of doing it through something like NetBeans, or if there's a different IDE that you prefer, like Eclipse or IntelliJ, you can certainly use one of those as well. So the total number of if and else statements necessary, it kind of depends on exactly how you do it. The way that I usually assume most people will try to do this at like this level of programming, it would take, there's going to be 3 big ones. So there's like a big if, else if, and else statement that kind of covers the first 2 comparisons. So basically checking to see which one of those 3 words comes first alphabetically. And then from there, you have an extra set when you do that final comparison between the two leftover words. So that gives you another if else. So you'll essentially have 6 of those as well. So altogether, it's effectively about 9 of them based on that. So that's basically how it goes. Any other questions? Okay, so if there's no other questions, I'll go ahead and switch over to NetBeans really quick. So I've got the program already written up right here. So I'll just go ahead and run this. So for this one, the way that I could do this, I could just go ahead and put in any one of the examples that I already have. But I think another possibility, just to be able to demonstrate that this works with any words that you put in, I will go ahead and just ask you guys to give me 3 words to enter for this. So if you could go ahead and just give me, we'll start with the first word. So if you guys want to just enter in something, so do taco, it looks like. So that's the first word. If anybody has anything for the second word? That's probably my least favorite word right now. But the second one will be snow. And then I see the last one is kangaroo. Do that. And then when we print it out, we'll see that we've got them in alphabetical order with K, then S, and then T with kangaroo, snow, and taco. So this is essentially how you would expect this program to work, is that regardless of any input that the user gives you, it's always going to make sure that the 3 words are sorted alphabetically. One other thing to note, just to make sure that nobody accidentally makes this mistake, I do want to clarify that while you don't have to worry about the user giving you the same word twice, you do at least have to account for the possibility that they'll give you 2 words that start with the same letter. So I guess using the words that you already gave me, let's say we do something like, I don't know, like taco, snow, and ski. That way then we have 2 words with the letter S. So if you do something like this, you want to make sure that it's still doing it alphabetically. Basically, this just means that you're not doing a comparison on, say, the very first character. You're actually doing comparisons with the strings themselves. So yeah. So other than that, I think that pretty much covers everything. Does anybody have any additional questions based on the examples I just went through? Alrighty, so that, go ahead and pause the recording here.